Welcome to 2020. Welcome to a brand new season of a Trekzone conversation. Last year, we talked science for 37 weeks, almost consecutively. This year, we're aiming for 50, and it all starts right now.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Welcome to a brand new year, as I said, and it is very exciting to welcome Dr. Brad Tucker back to the show for 2020. Brad, Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you.
Now, this is very cool because there's a new mixer in the studio now, so you actually get to hear the production of the show.
It's kind of fancy. It's like the first time you're actually hearing the show, even though talking on the show. Yeah, one of those weird concepts.
Hey, listen, Canberra has been blanketed by smoke with these bushfires that have been raging for weeks. They've been in the headlines worldwide now. How are things going down there for you?
Look, obviously here in Canberra, we're fine. There are no fires near us. And so there's nothing affecting us directly except the smoke. So, those who don't know geography here in Canberra, we sit just above the coastal range, slightly in a valley. So we're kind of surrounded by mountains. It makes it a great place to live. But what often happens is in the evening, we get a nice easterly sea breeze. So it comes off the coast and cools us down from the very hot days. Not yesterday, a couple days ago, we hit 44, which is 111 Fahrenheit, which was pretty warm. So this coastal breeze is great. But because that's where all the fires are, it's been bringing copious amounts of smoke that then just sits here. And we've had weeks now where it is so smoky outside, you need your lights on during the day. You have to wear a mask just outside. I have windows and doors sealed with towels and tape just to prevent seepage of the smoke cell because it just goes everywhere. It's been, it's hard to describe. It's like you're living in a campfire, except the campfire is everywhere, and it's a different kind of heat. And
professionally as well, Mount Stromlo has remained closed for a couple of weeks now, not just to visitors, but to employees as well.
Mount Stromlo and the University ANU, we have usually Christmas shutdown from the 24th to the 2nd. As is kind of quite common here in Australia. However, we have been closed not only a few days before that, but since the 2nd, not only have staff and students, in addition to the public, not been allowed, but we've pulled all residents off of the mountain, and we redirected observational things to other sites, and that's remaining even till today on the 7th, and it's likely to stay that way for at least another week. There's just actually, unfortunately, no end in sight in the fires. And, and when we're talking about levels that are 10 to 20 times the hazardous level, we literally have had the worst air quality in the world multiple days in the past few weeks. Imagine all those terrible places you sometimes see overseas. We are 10 to 20 times worse than some of those places.
It is incredible. And as you say, there is no end in sight. There is just so much fuel load on the ground. And with the heat and all the weather conditions, the fires, they just can't get on top of the fires.
Yeah, and it just keeps growing. We're talking about areas where, for me in home, and I did an image of this, where it's literally kind of Northern California. The entire area of Northern California is the sort of area that has been burnt in these fires in New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland earlier this year, or late last year. If this happened in a place in the U.S., you could affect upwards of 30 million people, 10, 20, 30 million people. We're talking a large area, so it's hard to get that out. And as you said, temperatures aren't changing. We're expected to go back up on Friday, and so they're expecting another flare-up of fires on Friday. So again, luckily, I and others here in Canberra have been safe. There has been loss of life on the coast, and what sometimes maybe the message hasn't gone out as much overseas is that there's something where they estimate about 500 million animals have died. Literally 500 million animals have died. It is that far-reaching.
It is devastating, especially for those communities directly affected, and the country as a whole, seeing these images play out on the news day in and day out, and knowing that there really is not a lot that can be done. It's almost letting it run its course and run to the coastline, and hopefully the ocean will stop them.
It is, and that's right. The ocean has stopped it, is the only thing that has stopped it in places because it's run to it. And, people have had to flee to the beach because that's the only safe place is getting in the ocean. And so it's continuing. And, we've seen some of the images from space of the huge dust and smoke plumes blowing over, especially, now covering New Zealand. New Zealand is covered in smoke, a couple hours away because of how it's blowing. This isn't, it really starts to see the big impact that we have of these fires. And it's quite interesting in that, maybe interesting is the right word, but now that we have such capability in space, we can not only the devastation of the fires from space, but we can also use space to help do real-time modeling of where the fire is flowing. So, in some ways there is a benefit that by measuring the real-time fuel loads of images from space, they can get better modeling of where the fire is going to go and at least try and put a dent in this, which has been another saving grace.
Talking Science Headlines.
And it's a new segment that we've got, Brad, that we're just going to cover off the headlines of the week in addition to our regular stories of the week. And one of the first ones that we've got is that SpaceX is going to be launching another 60 Starlink satellites tonight.
That's right. Yeah, scheduled for another batch going up tonight, so we'll see how that goes.
More exciting exoplanet news will be released later today from the TESS project, NASA's TESS.
Yeah, that's right. There's a really cool, it's kind of the Super Bowl of astronomy, so we don't know the details of these planets yet, but we'll be able to cover them more next week.
The Dragon resupply capsule that is currently docked at the International Space Station is going to be returning to Earth tonight after forecast high seas delayed the scheduled splashdown.
That's right. It's not always smooth sailing in space. And related, there was 11 astronauts graduated NASA's training program who will be the first class under the Artemis mission.
And that is absolutely incredible. And it's a big congratulations to them as well. I believe it's 2 astronauts from the Canadian Space Agency, 5 women, 6 men. So we're really engaging in this crewed missions back to the solar system.
One of these women will be the first woman on the moon.
Talking Science Stories of the Week.
Alrighty, Brad. Well, let's dive into the stories of the week. And the James Webb Space Telescope, known for its delays, apparently is still on track for a March 2021 launch.
Yeah, look, it isn't great when it's only known for the delays so far. And it's been a big project. So this is the successor to Hubble. So this was scheduled to be launched years ago. It's had delays and cost overruns. And late, not 2019, but 2018, kind of a reevaluation of where the project was and said, all right, no, it's going to be delayed another further, essentially 3 years, aiming for a March 2021 launch. Now, the good news is after almost a year and a half of that, and now only being about 15 months out from the launch date, it is still on track for a March 2021 launch date. In fact, last year, we covered how they actually joined the segments together to really start doing the final testing. So it's nice, that announcement that it is moving ahead as planned-ish.
And of course, the work is supported by the NASA budget. So Congress has approved that for the year. And hopefully we're going to see it in space next year.
It is. And look, there's a variety of reasons it's been delayed. One of them was some very good technical reasons. They tested it. They realized there were some parts they need to redesign. That's why you test before you launch it. Learning from the mistakes of Hubble, right? Hubble wasn't as tested as well, and famously it went in with the mirror not being perfect. So, again, it's not all bad. They're trying to solve the problems before it goes into orbit because, unlike Hubble, the James Webb cannot be serviced. This year is the 30th anniversary of the Hubble Space Telescope. April will be 30 years since the launch of the Hubble. Whereas James Webb doesn't have that possibility. Once it's up there, if it doesn't fully work, that's it, and you've just sunk $9 billion. So they're being really cautious to make sure everything's working. So I think in the long run, we'll see it being that the due diligence being paid back.
And the reason it's not serviceable is that it's going to be sitting in a very high orbit around Earth.
That's right. So Hubble has always been in low Earth orbit, so around that 400-kilometer mark. The James Webb will be much higher. And the reason it's going much higher, and again, none of the capability of servicing of, the next capsules being launched, is that it wants to look in different colors than Hubble. So it wants to look way more into the infrared, not only just what we call the near infrared, so like cricket vision or night vision, but the mid infrared. And so to do that, you need to be away from the Earth. So they need to go far away from the Earth so you don't get reflection or interference from the Earth, and then get as wide view as possible. So go much further away, similar to some of the other spacecraft like Spitzer or Kepler have done, that once it goes out, it's out there, and that will be its lifetime mission. Nominally, it should go for 5 years, but hopefully, as with other spacecraft that NASA's been operating, they get way more than 5 years out of it.
Astronomers have detected the first stars bubbling out from the cosmic dark ages. This sounds like an intro to a Showtime show.
It really does. And so, look, the cosmic dark ages and what we call the cosmic dawn. So you have the Big Bang. Hey, it does cool things. And then the universe cools down and it starts to form hydrogen and helium. But it takes a while for that stuff to form the first stars. It takes time for hydrogen and helium to fuse together to actually create the first stars. And then once those first stars are created, for that light to shine and kind of glow or kind of clear the fog, as some people have said, of the gas that is in that early universe, essentially show that these things exist. So the dark ages are that stage between stuff being created and the first stars really shining their light. And so it's really hard to obviously see the cosmic dark ages, but there's been a goal of trying to figure out where's that first point when the first stars are really being formed and turning on and doing their stuff. And because it's so far away in the early universe, it requires big telescopes and looking at colors of light to be able to see that far, and what we call redshift, the shifting of light, the Doppler effect of light. And
Brad, when we talk about the early years, well, it's sort of a couple of 100 million years.
Look, yeah, it is. So we're talking about 680 million years after the Big Bang, but the universe is 13.83 billion years. So you're talking about 13-ish billion years away from us, 13 billion years away. So this light literally left that area 13 billion years ago, and it's been traveling through the universe. Really hard to see, really faint. And it just takes time. The universe has to cool, and there's a long process of this hydrogen, what we call recombining, coming together to form stuff. And then you have this glow of hydrogen that what we call ionize. So the gas becomes heated, and you kind of change its state, kind of like you learn in chemistry in high school. And so this process takes time to do, and it takes millions of years in order to build enough stuff that you can actually see it. So it takes a long time to be able to be seen with a really big telescope. So a new project using a telescope in Arizona, a 4-meter telescope, thinks they've seen some of these very first bubbles forming in these galaxies. And it was just announced yesterday.
It is incredible to think that they've looked back or looked that far and seen something so faint in what we're calling the Dark Ages.
It really is. It's a remarkable achievement, and this has been a big push of a lot of projects. There's been radio telescopes in Australia trying to find the very first hydrogen gas, the very first signs of the gas itself, since radio telescopes can pick up the actual underlying gas from this ages, because it really kind of pinpoints really the evolution of stuff in the universe. Yes, there's the Big Bang and all that sort of stuff, but once we start forming stars, that is the beginning of kind of the stuff in our universe, the beginnings of stars and then planets and galaxies and black holes and, all that sort of stuff we love to talk about. You need to know when it actually first began. So you have to see in the Dark Ages, you have to see when the Dark Ages ended and the cosmic dawn began. It's a really nice Carl Sagan, I guess, kind of song almost.
And I'm just reading this research that you sent through, or this article. These bubbles of hydrogen, they overlap spatially, and they're large enough by about 2.2 million light years. So we're not talking something the size of a house here, are we?
No, we're talking about huge bubbles, and kind of in the nearby universe, we call these clumps or voids of galaxies that we know the universe evolved to have areas where there's more galaxies and less galaxies. So looking back in the universe, you can see clumps or bubbles of these things, which then would go on to form these clumps and this stuff in the universe, and more areas of stuff and less areas of stuff. So as you said, you're talking about a huge size, something that's a million light years away. To put into scale, Our Milky Way is only about 100,000 light years across. So you're talking about something 20 times bigger than our Milky Way.
Fantastic, Brad. Well, it is fun to talk science with you every week, as we did for 37 weeks last year. We're aiming for 50 this year. I reckon we can do it, eh?
So far, we're on track as long as the weather somewhat cooperates.
And so long as those bushfires eventually
go out,
phase out.
Yes. Let's hope. And, as those in Australia and others, most of the fireys are volunteers. It's a volunteer fire service that is pretty heroic. So
absolutely. And of course, we do thank the American crews, New Zealand crews that have come over to lend a hand, and of course,
and the Canadians,
and the Canadians as well. It is absolutely incredible. It is such a large scale disaster. It really is a disaster, and the next phase is going to be disaster recovery.
It will be.
So it's incredible. But Brad, we will be picking those. We will be talking about those with a climate scientist and a weather expert in our main show over the next 2 Saturdays. So be on the lookout for that one. Of course, you can find Brad at btucker22 on Twitter, Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. You can find me at Miramat86 on Twitter. Brad, thank you again for talking science this week, and we'll catch you next week.
Sounds good.